Let's take a look at some properties of multiplication. Some of these names should be familiar because we also talked about them when we did addition. So we'll start with the closure property. So the closure property, when we saw this with addition, just says if you have any two whole numbers and you add them together, that the answer would be a whole number. And so we have that with multiplication as well. If we have any two whole numbers and we multiply them together, our answer will be a whole number. So if we say A and B are whole numbers, then we know A times B is going to be a whole number. However, this also holds for integers. So we know integers are just whole numbers with some negatives included as well. So we could say, or integers. And so then if we multiply A times B, if we're talking about A and B being whole numbers, then A times B is a whole number. But if we're talking about A and B being integers, then A times B is an integer. And this makes sense if you think about it, because of course we wouldn't expect to multiply two whole numbers together and get, for example, a fraction, or I wouldn't multiply two whole numbers together and get a negative, right? Now, if I include integers, if I have negatives in there, so like, for example, I have a positive times a negative, I know that would give me a negative, right? So I would expect that I would get an integer, but I wouldn't expect to get like, an irrational number or something. And then the names kind of give these away on some of the properties. So the multiplicative property of 0 simply describes what happens anytime you multiply by 0. So, and we know any number times 0 is just 0. So we could say for any number A, that if we took A and multiplied it by 0, we would get 0. And the same is true if you did it in the other order, if you did 0 times A, right? It doesn't matter which one comes first. And then the multiplicative property of 1 is describing what happens if we multiply something by 1. So we know any number times 1 is itself. So we could say for any number A, if we took A and multiplied it by 1, we would just get A back again. And also on this one, it doesn't matter the order again. So we could also say 1 times A is also A. And this one is referred to sometimes as the identity property. When you look at the homework in MyLab Math, those practice assignments, they'll refer to that identity property. So this is the one that they're talking about. And this actually works for any number, really. So like, we're not just limited to whole numbers or integers. We could say, including rational numbers. If I multiply a rational number times 0, I get 0. If I multiply a rational number times 1, I get that rational number back again.